So thanks for tuning into the video. Today I'm going to be speaking with Neil McCallum. He's the Vice President of Exploration at Standard Uranium. Standard Uranium is a junior exploration company focused on finding a uranium deposit in the southwest Athabasca Basin. Their flagship property is the Davidson River project, and that's the one we're going to be covering in detail today. Davidson River has never been drilled before, and it's located to the west of existing high-grade, well-known uranium deposits such as NexGen Energy's Arrow and Fission Uranium's RRR. Neil himself is a geologist. He's had over 15 years of experience in the uranium sector. He's excited to come speak with us today. We're going to talk about why they're excited about Davidson River, what they're seeing in the geochemistry and the geophysics that has them confident that they might make a discovery of merit. I hope this video serves you well as a source of due diligence. If you like what you see today, please click like, comment what you liked. If you happen to be watching it on YouTube, we always appreciate you clicking the subscribe button in the bottom right corner. It will be a bit of a longer interview. Neil and I are diving deep into the technicalities of the deposit. So if you want to skip ahead to any section, we will be providing timestamps for you to do so. Just take a look down below and you can jump ahead to the point in the video you're most interested in. So I hope you enjoy the video. Let's get to it. So good afternoon, Neil. Welcome to the show. Good to have you here. How are you doing today, sir?
Really good, thanks. Glad to be on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And I'm actually really looking forward to this discussion. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts of things here. So I hope that everyone finds this, educational and enjoyable. I understand that you just came back from the camping with the kids and such. How did that go for you?
Yeah, it went relatively well. Did the classic pitch a tent in a rainstorm and then deal with wet stuff, but it went okay in the end.
Right. You look like you're no worse for wear anyway, so that's good. So we are starting to see some big movement in the uranium sector. Standard Uranium has been moving, of course. Cameco is breaking out. So we are starting to see some money move back into the sector again, even with the spot price kind of tracking a little bit sideways for the last while. So exciting times in the space. What are your thoughts just in general on what it's like to be in the uranium sector right now?
Yeah, definitely. I've been following the uranium sector for 15 years and seen a few cycles up and down, all the way through. The fundamentals for uranium demand have been there. It's somewhat of an issue with supply, but certainly any discoveries in the Athabasca Basin, because of the grade and size potential, are always going to be valuable assets. And certainly what we're looking for is adding to that roster of Athabasca Basin discoveries that are large and high grade.
Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, you're a geologist, but for the viewers, what's your background in uranium? What kind of experience do you have with respect to uranium and specifically the Athabasca Basin?
Certainly, yeah. I've spent parts of my entire career in uranium, particularly in the Athabasca Basin. One of my first jobs out of university was staking claims by hand in the Patterson Lake region, which is part of now the Patterson Lake North property, operated by Fission 3.0, and claims in the Waterbury Lake area on the eastern side of the Athabasca Basin, which was originally my consulting group that I work for, DeRouge Geological, started consulting for a company called Strathmore Minerals, and that was the predecessor to Fission Energy. When they split their Canadian and US assets, we were working for Strathmore at that time. So one of my first tasks out of university was to compile all historic information in the Athabasca Basin. So I've been diving deep into the geology, the geophysics, the geochemistry, the Athabasca Basin for a long time now.
So, and really, then you would have got your start around the last time that uranium was getting hot, right? At the when the uranium market was really picking up last time, and here we find ourselves again.
That's right. Yeah, it's good to be back.
So 2.0, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And now you're in charge of the drill program as VP exploration, so it's got to be an exciting time for you.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. Because I've seen so many uranium exploration projects in the Athabasca Basin, I kind of have a sense of scale on what makes a good target.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly this one is up there in the ranks of, you know, a lot of potential investors have asked, just why hasn't this project been drilled before? It seems like it's got a lot of the right ingredients for finding a high-grade uranium deposit, and why hasn't it been looked at before? So really excited to finally get out there and test the project.
Absolutely. So, and before we dive deep into the Davidson River project, I did want to cover off a couple things, because Standard Uranium has put out news recently that you did acquire some more properties in the the northeast section of the Athabasca, what we would maybe call the more traditional area of exploration, and then also the northwest corner. So could you speak a little bit more about those properties, why you acquired them, why now, and what value you feel that they add to shareholders?
Yeah, certainly. The three projects that we have in the Eastern Basin, like you said, the more traditional area, are the Canary, Ascent, and Atlantic projects. And these cover target areas that are, like you said, more traditional uranium exploration targets. So it's in a known area of the Eastern Athabasca Trend that has been the primary source of uranium mining in Saskatchewan. So there's mills nearby, infrastructure, and certainly the exploration methods are a little bit more known in that area compared to the Southwest Athabasca Basin. So we're seeing an area kind of at the northern eastern trend that I find really interesting. I think it shares a lot of similarities with the trend further south, but it's seen far less exploration despite a lot of the same interesting ingredients for potential uranium deposit. So. And then the other project that we recently expanded upon, we had part of the project for a while. It's called the Gunner project. And it has its namesake from the Gunner mine, which is a historically operated uranium mine in the Beaver Lodge area, which was the focus of uranium exploration and production in Saskatchewan before the Athabasca Basin was recognized as the place to be looking. So it sits just north of the Athabasca Basin, and the expanded project at the Gunner project covers parts of the Athabasca Basin itself. So it definitely has potential for finding a more classic unconformity style deposit. And certainly we know that there's uranium nearby from those basement-hosted Beaver Lodge style uranium deposits, reactivated structures, graphite quarters, all these ingredients that we know you need to have in order to have a uranium deposit. So we're really excited about that one as well. So just adding value, expanding upon our flagship Davidson project.
So obviously Davidson River is going to be the focus, but with these new properties, do you expect to be spending any money on them this year, or are they more something that you're going to focus effort on, say, in 2021?
Yeah, it'll definitely be part of the pipeline of what we're working on. I think the majority of our exploration budget for 2020 will be Davidson River. It's something we've been excited to explore for since we acquired it. And we've built our company around it. So certainly our focus is going to be that project, but there are things we can do with a small budget to add value to those projects to get them a little bit closer to the drill ready stage. And, if we want to advance those ourselves, or partner with another company that's looking for projects, that's something we're open to as well. Certainly the Athabasca Basin it's a limited size, so only a certain amount of companies can own ground in the area, and a common strategy is for companies to earn into projects, to joint venture, just to get exploration going, because not everybody can spend all the money in the basin. So partnering has been a big part of exploration in the Athabasca Basin.
So the other thing that Standard Uranium has put out, some more news that's come out since we interviewed John Bay last, was that you've added a couple new key personnel to the project. Can you briefly touch on what expertise that they bring and why their addition is so important to success at Davidson River?
Yeah, definitely. The two people are Sean Hillaker and Galen McNamara. So these two individuals worked closely with one of our directors, Garrett Ainsworth, who has a long history in the Southwest Athabasca Basin. So Sean and Galen were big parts of the team at NexGen when they were doing the initial exploration and development work at the Arrow deposit. So they know the rocks intimately well in that region, and certainly will be able to help us on our way to piece together what we find at the drill bit for our Davidson River project. So I'm really excited to have them on our team to help us focus our exploration just that much more.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, the company has really been able to compile quite a bit of experience between yourself, Garrett, Sean, Galen. Like you're bringing a lot of experience to the table from other successful projects. So that's obviously got to have shareholders probably feeling pretty good.
I think so. Yeah.
Experienced hands sort of steering the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've covered those two topics off. So let's get into the deep dive on Davidson River, because that is the company's focus. That is the flagship property.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe before we get too deep, for anyone watching that might not know uranium geology well, and that's probably going to be most people, when it comes to a uranium deposit, if you think of it in terms of ingredients, I like using analogies. If you think of it in terms of ingredients, what ingredients are required on a high level to get a really nice uranium deposit in the Southwest Athabasca?
Yep. Okay, so there's a few key ingredients that you need, and a lot of them don't directly detect uranium. A lot of the deposits in the Athabasca Basin are undercover. So whether it's boring Athabasca sandstone that has very little uranium in it, because you're looking often at the unconformity between that sandstone and the basement beneath it. So you often can't see these deposits. Any of the easy ones to be found have been found already. So we need to rely a little bit on geophysics to point us in the right direction. And one of those geophysical tools that's incredibly common in the area is an electromagnetic survey. And what that does is it looks for graphite and or sulfide rocks. And the sort of key piece there is that those graphite and sulfide rocks end up being a reaction front for uranium-rich fluids to drop out that uranium at those reducing graphite sulfide-rich rocks. So when we're looking for things, we call them conductors, because they conduct the electromagnetic energy of these surveys. And we test the rocks along that conductor to look for uranium. So not every conductor has uranium, but all uranium deposits, with a few exceptions, in the Athabasca Basin are related to these conductors. whether it's beside the conductor, right in the middle of the conductor. They're all somewhat related. So that's the main tool that a lot of people use for exploration. A second tool, which is helpful, is geochemistry. So it may not detect the deposit directly, but it may detect subtle alteration where maybe in the sandstone it's elevated in uranium just a little bit, or other pathfinder elements. Or it might be water that's downstream, or lake sediments that are downstream or down ice of a deposit. And those tools have helped make other discoveries in the Athabasca Basin. Other useful tools might be just a plain old structural analysis, because you need reactivated sort of long-acting structures to make a uranium deposit. You need those structures to drive fluid flow, and that fluid flow is part of what makes a uranium deposit. So you need the structures, you need the graphite-rich conductors, and geochemistry certainly helps you prioritize and determine which of those graphite-rich conductors is the best one to be looking at.
So it's fair to say, so the uranium-bearing fluids, they would be reacting with the graphite and the sulfide rock that ends up precipitating out the uranium that's forming your deposit. You did talk about fluid flow. So with respect to that, then it would be important for the rocks, if you have a lot of fracturing, faulting, and broken up rock, or high porosity, like the void space in the rock, that would obviously play a key role as well then?
Absolutely, yeah. You need that pore space for the fluids to flow. So part of that can be structural alteration or structural breaking of the rock, creating that pore space. Certainly, when you have an alteration system that's driving the uranium fluid flow, that can also create open pore space. So certainly, that fluid flow is a key piece of it, because you need that uranium circulating around, whether it's in the basement rocks or whether it's in the sandstone, or that unconformity where those two major rock types meet.
Okay. So, and as part of your presentation, you talk about the Clearwater Domain theory. So let's maybe delve into that a little bit. For those listening in that aren't really sure what the Clearwater Domain is and why it's important, could you let's start there. The Clearwater Domain, why is it important? I mean, you're just to the west of it. Arrow and Fission, or Arrow and Triple R, are just to the east. So what role is it playing here in making the Davidson River project, a possible uranium deposit?
That's right. So we're sort of unraveling that piece right now of what exactly the Clearwater Domain is and how it relates to the uranium deposits. But what we've sort of been noticing in the research community is that the Clearwater Domain is composed of partly younger intrusive rocks. And those younger intrusive rocks are overprinting the magnetic signature of the region. And you can see that quite clearly in some of the regional magnetic maps of the region, where it's sort of a corrugated pattern of highs and lows to the east and to the west of the Clearwater. But it's a bit of an interesting magnetic high at that Clearwater Domain. And that sort of indicates that something was going on to disturb the pre-existing magnetic signature. So part of the reason why those younger intrusives are important is that they can serve as the heat engine for driving a uranium deposit. So that heat engine helps to circulate the fluids, create the alteration, create the stress regime, perhaps, of these shear zones that host the uranium deposits. So, and it may even be part of the source of uranium as well, because uranium is quite mobile, it can dissolve and transport fairly easily. So if these intrusive rocks of the Clearwater Domain contained elevated uranium, that could also be a source of the uranium in the region. So with R Arrow on one side, we are on the other side of the Clearwater Domain. And we do know from other projects that are on the west side that, like the Smart Lake project, which is a joint venture between Cameco and Pierpoint, that one has some minor uranium hits. They might be onto something, but I think they have only really started their exploration there. Another project that's been known for a while is the Shea Creek deposit, and then there's another one in Alberta, which is a little bit further away, which indicates.
And these are north of you, right, Neil? These.
That's right. Those are all north of us. That's
okay.
right.
They're on the west side of the Clearwater Domain, north of Davidson River.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Just wanted
clarity for everyone. That's okay. Yeah. So one of the main structures that we're going to focus on appears to be a continuation of that Smart Lake zone, and then what we can see is that the same conductive zone travels from Smart Lake through our project and then through the Clearwater Domain. And then on the other side, it seems to continue and link up with the R Arrow deposits, which on the east side is named the Patterson Lake Corridor. And it's important to note the word corridor as opposed to a simple trend of one conductor. A corridor is kind of a word to describe a few parallel conductors. It's not just one thin conductor like you might have on the Eastern Basin. The conductive corridors are somewhat wide shear zones that contain maybe many different conductors.
So that's a differentiating aspect of the Southwest Athabasca versus exploring in the Northeast.
That's right. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a unique scenario where we kind of have to use a different exploration model for the Southwest Athabasca compared to the Eastern Athabasca. Okay. So certainly having those individuals like Sean and Galen and Garrett Ainsworth on our team that have been looking at these conductive corridors to the east on that Patterson Lake conductive corridor are really going to help us on our project on the west side.
So it's fair to say, like you have on the east side of the domain, the Patterson Lake corridor trends to the northeast, and then I guess the mirror image theory would be Davidson River trending off sort of to the northwest through the Davidson River project. That same conductor that's kind of theorized to underlie that whole area.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. When it comes to Southwest Athabasca versus Northeast, do you still deal with the sandstone? Like, do you find the same level of sandstone cover over the basement rocks that you would, say, for example, versus up by, Cigar Lake, something like that?
Some projects in the Southwest Athabasca Basin do, some of them don't. Right around the R deposit, the Athabasca Basin pinches right out, and you only have basement rocks above, a little bit of overburden. So when you continue northeast towards the Arrow deposit and then the Spitfire zone, which is another uranium zone operated by Pierpoint, Cameco, and Riva, and it can get really deep along that same Patterson Lake trend as you get towards Denison and ALX's Hook Carter project, and then even deeper still to maybe 500, 800 meters at Cameco's project, continuing deeper into the basin. So It is difficult to explore with a deeper amount of Athabasca Basin because you're having to drill through rock that is not going to contain any uranium. It's just going to cause troubles with drilling because in this area, a lot of the sandstone is unconsolidated and somewhat difficult to explore. So that's part of the problem that they're having at Cigar Lake is the sandstone above the deposit is clay rich, it's altered, and it's incredibly soft and unstable. So to actually do any mining of that deposit near the unconformity, they need to freeze it and make sure that the water doesn't flood the mine. And they did have some problems with those projects, and we won't have that problem on Standard Uranium's Davidson River project because we don't have any Athabasca Basin rocks that we know of, at least. It should all be basement rocks with some overburden on top of it. So we are just south of the Athabasca Basin in our case.
So, okay, so that, I guess that saves you on drilling costs and time, right? The meters, the meterage that you're able to drill goes farther because you're not having to drill through the sandstones.
That's right, yeah.
Okay,
We'll have
so like an advantage.
overburden straight into the basement, and then we'll keep testing the basement until either the rocks are not altered or into a rock type that's not interesting to us. We know that with the Arrow deposit, that deposit can be quite deep into the basement. So upwards of 900 meters below surface or more, I think in some cases, they're hitting the uranium in these near vertical structures. That's really interesting how deep that is. And certainly we don't know what elevation our deposit would be if there is a deposit on our project. So certainly we can test our corridors and we will know if there's something deeper based on some of the alteration. What they're seeing at the Arrow deposit is above the mineralized zones, they're seeing a lot of structures, a lot of clay alteration that indicate that something's nearby, even if that particular hole was not carrying any uranium. So,
and what kind of so you would call the zone of alteration, the zone of altered rock that actually surrounds the deposit itself, the stuff that you're after, the uranium ore, that would be called your alteration halo or alteration envelope, I believe. How big are we talking? Like, how wide is that halo roughly? Because when you're drilling these things, right, I mean, it's probably easy to miss the ore, but how easy is it to miss the alteration itself? Is there a fairly wide sort of error, like, that you can have and still hit it?
Yeah. So some of these deposits appear to be quite narrow and vertically extensive. So even in the vertical plane, like up and down, it'll have alteration above and below the deposit, but not so much, let's say, to the east or to the west on the sides. These appear to be, at least in the southwest Athabasca Basin, fairly vertically oriented structures. So we will be able to test this in either direction, vertically, above and below, and we should be able to see that alteration, maybe not beside it, but more vertically up and down.
Above and below.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
So you just have to pick the right spot along trend, I guess, to drill then.
Yeah, I mean, even if we do like a series of drilling along strike, we should be able to tell if we're near something, if we go through that structure to see if there's alteration or brecciation or some sort of indication that there was mineralizing event nearby, even if we don't hit uranium on those holes. We'll be able to know if we're in the right direction. Yeah.
Okay. And for anyone listening, I know most people will know this, but just for those, brecciation, by that you mean broken up rock, correct?
Broken up rock, yeah.
Fractured rock. Okay.
Yeah, fractured.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about what you've seen so far, geophysics and geochemistry wise. Maybe we can start with the geochemistry to make you think that you're near something, you're near a target of interest.
Yeah. There hasn't been a lot of geochemistry on the project, but what has been done is incredibly positive in my mind. The Southwest Athabasca region that we're looking at here was covered in 1978 by a regional lake sediment survey. So they collected sediment samples from the lake bottom, analyzed that for uranium and other elements, and kind of gives you a rough idea where a mineral deposit might be nearby. So at the time, they were not sure what they were looking for, whether it was a nickel or copper deposit or uranium deposit. But what they ended up finding is that most of the samples averaged around 1 ppm uranium, which is quite low and not interesting. On the Davidson River project, there was a sample of 21 ppm uranium and a few others that were elevated, but certainly that 21 sticks out incredibly well. And that's always been one of the reasons kind of in the background that I really like the project, because that kind of tells us that we're in the right area. It's not going to tell you exactly where the deposit is, but it tells you that, okay, there's uranium here. We just need to figure out where that came from.
And the other theory would be, sorry, Neil, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the theory would be that deposit, or sorry, that sample that you got the 21 parts per million uranium on, that would have come from outcrop at some point or another of the deposit that made its way into that lake downstream or down ice of glaciated areas.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. It could be movement of uranium in the from glaciers that came by. Could be from just the rivers coming through, just bringing that uranium and elevating the background of the region of that lake itself. So it kind of gets us, in the right area for sure. And what really makes sense to me is that when we did our airborne geophysical surveys, those EM surveys, to define our conductive corridors on our project, one of the strongest corridors that we've called the warrior trend is just up ice or upstream from that lake sediment survey. So, a possible scenario might be that glaciers and other weathering processes sort of leach the uranium out of any deposit that's on that structure and deposit it in the lake downstream or down ice. So, I mean, that's a lot of arm waving, but it really tells us we could be in the right area.
Right.
These lake sediment sample surveys show a good thumbprint of other deposits. Key Lake is a really good example, also at the south end of the basin, just way over on the east end. The idea of the lake sediment sample surveying is that it gets us in the right area, not exactly the right place to drill, but it gets us in the right area. Other deposits in the Athabasca Basin show a good signature with these lake sediment samples, which is the Key Lake deposit, which was discovered quite a while ago. It's been mined out, but down ice of that deposit, there's some high elevated uranium in lake sediment samples, which kind of gives a positive signature to our project. It's useful in a regional sense to tell us that we're we were nearby something. So that's got me really interested. The combination of those EM conductors and that lake sediment sample is certainly that tells us we're on the right direction.
So that's interesting. So let's talk about the geophysics, and we can start with the EM conductors. I mean, your slide deck, your investor presentation is very heavy on the geophysics.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, ultimately, that's the information that Standard Uranium has to go by, right? No, there has been no drilling on this property. You will be the first ones to drill it. So up until this point, you're using that geochemistry or the geophysics to help kind of dial you in to the most prospective areas.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the geophysics, let's talk about that. The electromagnetic conductors, you did both VTEM and ZTEM or ZTEM. I don't know what the the right way to say it is. I guess depends if you live north or south of the 49th parallel. But so let's talk about that. What you're expecting those surveys to kind of tell you and what it shows at Davidson River.
That's right. Okay, so the EM surveys are telling us whether there's graphite-rich, sulfide-rich rocks in the basement. Those two different surveys are sort of targeting the same rock type, but with a little bit of a different method of getting about doing that. So the VTEM survey is better at defining shallower targets, and it can get you a little bit more precise of where those conductors are. And then not only where the conductors are, but where there's breaks or offsets kind of pinpoint us. And the electromagnetic survey, the ZTEM, is another one that's used that tells us a little bit of a deeper slice of the rocks. So the importance of the ZTEM is that it will point us towards major structures because they're deeper, they're probably going to be more significant, and those deeper structures mean, maybe whatever alteration or structural deformation went on in the area was deeper, more significant. And it certainly has highlighted three main areas to look on our project. The VTEM survey has a lot more conductors, but maybe some of them aren't quite as significant because they're only showing us a shallow signature. So in combination of those two surveys really gets us a lot of the right ingredients. And what we can do is look at the geophysical signature of other deposits, either in the southwest Athabasca Basin or the greater Athabasca Basin itself, to say, oh, this target on our project looks awfully similar to this deposit over here or that deposit over there. And we can use that sort of analogy to highlight which areas we're going to test on our project based on those same similarities.
Okay, so the key points here being then that you're looking where the VTEM and the ZTEM are overlapping, where they're both sort of reinforcing that there's something of interest there. I know on the first slide, I think that looks at the VTEM and the ZTEM, you do have a bunch of coloring on the map. If somebody that's not familiar with geophysics looks at that, is that coloring representing the magnetics of the system, or what are they looking at with the coloring, the colors itself?
Yeah, certainly. So those colors on that image are the magnetics. So it kind of gives you a signature of the basement rocks where the underlying rocks are the basement rocks, and that magnetics is pretty much a signature of those basement rocks. So where you've got magnetic highs and magnetic lows, it doesn't really tell you exactly where to go on just the magnetics. What we're seeing in the southwest Athabasca Basin is these deposits seem to occur right at the edge of a magnetic high to a magnetic low. So right in that sort of edge, I guess you'd call it, of a magnetic
Transition
feature.
zone, or is it
Transition zone, yeah, I guess you
Okay.
could call it that. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're
So,
seeing
but
our
I'm looking at that right now,
yeah,
and I see that you've identified. So I'm looking at the slide as of today, anyway, and this could change. Of
yeah,
course, it's slide 11 that
yeah,
you have. I see ZTEM conductors. I see the VTEM conductors, and those are falling roughly in between as you're transitioning from that really high magnetic reading, moving over into the like lower magnetic reading. So that's what you're looking for.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're seeing that a few other deposits in the area too. That transition from magnetic high to magnetic low, and where you want to look specifically is helping is looking at those conductive corridors that seem to be right on the edge. Yeah.
Now, is there anything of significance, Neil, when you look at this slide? The VTEM conductors, the ZTEM conductors tend to run roughly northwest, and the magnetic structures seem to run the same direction as well. Is there anything to take from the fact that those are kind of running in the same direction? Is that of any importance here?
Yeah, it really just confirms that those EM conductors are related to the basement rocks. Sometimes in some areas, the conductivity can be explained by other things other than the basement. So maybe more recent sediments or lakes or stream sediments on surface, near surface. But when our conductors are at the same trend as the magnetics, that tells me that they're going to be basement hosted, which is what we want to see.
And did they see the same thing at Arrow and Triple R, where the magnetics are running the same direction as your conductors?
On the east side of the Clearwater, the magnetics seem to be trending in the same direction as those conductors.
Okay.
Yeah.
So once again, you're applying, I guess, that the success that other companies have had in delineating a deposit, looking for the same things that they found, and you're seeing that more or less the same thing here on the west side. You're seeing the VTEM, ZTEM reinforcing each other. You've got the transition between high magnetics and low magnetics. You're in that transition zone.
Yeah.
And then you're having the magnetic structures running the same direction as the conductors themselves.
Yeah.
So far, so good. Everything's kind of lining up with what you've seen at other successful deposits.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So if we sort of progress, then we could use the presentation. So again, I don't know when whoever will be watching the video, the slide deck could change, but as of today, when we're watching it, it's slide 12. You're talking about magnetic lineament analysis. I hope I said that right. So this one, it says you're looking for cross structures. So can you explain to people why this is important? Why this, having these structures cross over the conductors leads you to, potential mineralization?
Sure. Yeah, certainly. So that image has a background of magnetics, so it's having that same trend as the EM conductors. And what we want to look at is those structures that appear to cross the main trend of magnetics and electromagnetics, because those cross-cutting structures are important targets because they could potentially be areas where pore space has opened up, areas where any sort of shear zone is disturbed and broken open, creating that brecciation, that open pore space for uranium fluids to travel through or travel towards in a possible uranium alteration system. So other deposits in the Athabasca Basin occur along these structures that cross-cut the EM trend. So we have outlined on our project quite a few on the slide that you're referring to in those red circles. There's quite a few that cross through the project, and we've mapped that as one targeting layer going forward.
So how exactly is this just that more geophysical voodoo, as they say, or how do they actually determine, map these these cross-cutting structures? Is that
Yeah,
just
um, you,
interpretation of the data? Not
you
that we need
can,
to get into the details, but
yeah, just really briefly, what we've done is taken the regional magnetics that the government of Canada, in partnership with Saskatchewan government, have done a large regional airborne survey of the area to help uranium companies since the discovery of these significant deposits in the region. They've flown these surveys, and what we can do is filter out that data with a few different techniques, uh, software, sort of taking that data, filtering it, and you can really sort of interpret things as you see breaks in those magnetic trends. You can zoom way out, zoom way in, and compile everything that you see together. And that's sort of what I've done on that slide, taken a few of what I see as the most significant ones that could affect our trends. And certainly, I think that you know, 5 different people will come up with 5 different interpretations, but they're generally going to be about the same. So it's a little bit of a arm waving, a little bit of interpretation, but certainly I think if lots of different people did it, they could come up with quite similar results. Certainly on our project, you can spend a lot of time sort of digitizing faults, digitizing breaks, but there's quite a few that are on our project that I think are quite significant.
so, and you did mention people there and how maybe different people can have different interpretations. On that note, maybe as an aside, the people that you've had analyze this with you, do they have experience on any other deposits in the Southwest Athabasca?
Absolutely, yeah. So the people that have been looking at our electromagnetics, the VTEM and the ZTEM, is a company called Condor Consulting. And that company has been around for quite a while. The owner of that company has been in the mineral exploration business for quite a while, and has been looking at projects in the Athabasca Basin for, I think he entered the space right around the last boom in the mid-2000s, and has been looking at surveys all over the basin, interpreting them, leading companies towards discoveries. And so he's seen probably the majority of the airborne electromagnetic surveys in the entire Athabasca Basin, including several in the Southwest Athabasca. I know he was part of some of the interpretation that NexGen was doing. So he's got an eye for what to look for, certainly.
So yeah, I mean, that's good to hear, because obviously, in the context you were giving, that there is a bit of arm waving sometimes, and you can possibly interpret it a different way. It certainly doesn't hurt to have people that have been doing this for a while, and they've done it at other deposits where they've successfully discovered high grade mineralization of uranium. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so next, let's progress to the next slide in the slide deck. And again, I don't know when people will be watching this video if the slide deck will have changed, but at the time of us filming this, it's slide 13, and it was talking about the breaks and offsets along the VTEM conductor. So Neil, could you tell us about why these breaks and offsets are important and why you're looking for them?
So these breaks and offsets are telling us similar to what we're trying to interpret from that magnetic cross-cutting structure analysis. When we've got the breaks and offsets along the conductive corridor, that's suggesting to us that there is some sort of alteration or structural process that changed the trend of the EM, and maybe that got faulted off to one side, and part of that is part of a mineralizing event that broke up that conductor. Part of what can make that break in the conductor is some people think that is related to the graphite actually getting destroyed by the alteration associated with a deposit. So certainly we can take the example of the Arrow deposit, where the EM conductor is broken and offset, and in the middle of that offset, you've got the deposit. So if you're looking at that slide 13, you can see the color-coded, the color image, and you can see the deposit in pink and purple with the black outline is right at that transition between the magnetic high and the magnetic low.
Yeah.
And you can see the red lines to the southwest and northeast. And you can't quite tell because the deposit is overprinted, but that's right where a break and offset of the conductive corridor is located.
So those thinner red lines, Neil, that are running northeast, southwest, those are the conductors themselves.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, and you can clearly see for Arrow there's a big offset and break, both, right?
Yeah.
If I'm reading that correctly.
That's right. Yeah. So that's what it tells us, is that possibly that conductor is broken off visually from the interpretation, because that deposit created the graphite, the alteration that destroyed some of the graphite, and it shows up as a break in the conductor. So we've taken that example and found a few areas along our conductive corridors where that break and offset happens as well. And you can see quite a few along what we call our main trend, the Warrior trend, which is on the sort of eastern side of our project.
The red and orange dots that run along the conductor, those are what, if anyone's wondering at home?
Yeah, certainly. Those are what the geophysical consultants have picked as our the highest conductivity. As the survey goes along, they can pinpoint exactly where the highest conductivity is. So they call it our VTEM picks, where they pick the most conductive part of the trend.
Mm-hmm.
So as the survey goes back and forth, when they notice where there's a break or an offset, that's what I've tried to highlight here.
Okay. So yeah, I guess, so knowing what those dots are now, you can look at that and see where, they're kind of running in a straight line, and then all of a sudden it's offset out of nowhere. Yeah. And then that area you've highlighted with the oval, and you can definitely see areas where they're not even registering that pick or peak anymore.
Exactly.
Okay. So that again, so when you talk about the alteration destroying the graphite or the sulfide, that would be just the uranium bearing fluid in the process of that fluid reacting with the graphite or the sulfide rock and precipitating the uranium out. The graphite itself is consumed or destroyed in the process, and you're left with an area that is no longer as conductive as it used to be.
Yeah, that'd be a good explanation. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So so potentially the areas where there's no, or it wouldn't be no conductivity, I'm assuming, and I'm guessing it's lower conductivity, or
it would certainly be lower conductivity.
Markedly lower. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that Arrow, the slide, like having you explain this and then looking at the Arrow deposit now, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. You can see the offset, you can see the break, you can see that it's in between the two, the magnetic high, the magnetic low. You can see that the conductors are running in the same direction. Like, you seem to have all of the same type of things happening that they have at Arrow. So, I mean, that's obviously good to see. So moving on then, so the next slide, looking for VTEM conductive bright spots. So this seems to be kind of like the exact opposite of what we just looked at. So you were trying to highlight areas where the VTEM, you kind of lose the conductivity or it drops off. Now we're looking for where it's the highest.
That's right. Yeah, it's kind of, they are opposite things. We've got the destruction of graphite and or sulfide that's causing less conductivity. What we're seeing in a lot of other deposits, including the RRR deposit, is that you have this localized area where the conductivity ends up being quite high. and you find uranium deposits right around the edge of these bright spots. And the image that you can see, if you're looking at the slideshow in the bottom right, is over a part of the Patterson Lake South project of Fission. And the red to blue scale is the conductivity image. And you have the red zone there right around where it shows you the RRR deposit. So right at the south edge of that bright spot there is the RRR deposit, and you can see some of those dots on that map are the pics that were made by their consultant. Similar to those little dots are the peaks of the conductivity on our project. So you can see that there's not one series of picks. You can see a couple of picks in those areas because the conductivity is too wide to just pick one pick. It ends up being a few parallel picks, let's say. And you've got that bright spot right next to the deposit. So I don't know that anybody's...
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody's done enough research to figure out exactly why those bright spots happen. But some people have suggested maybe it's an increase in conductivity due to the clay minerals, that when the clay is quite wet, it can be conductive and create these bright spots. And those clay minerals might be related to an alteration system that could have brought the uranium to deposit on those conductors that are basement related.
So on that map for RRR, you're definitely seeing, as I'm looking at it here, you have that bright spot, and kind of just to the south, sort of south or southeast, it's the actual deposit. So it's not right on the bright spot, but it's kind of offset. And along the same lines of what we talked about earlier, you can actually see a little bit of offsetting to the north and a little bit of what looks like a drop in conductivity too. So you actually have that as well, correct? Am I interpreting that right?
Yeah, exactly. On their project or our project?
On their project.
On their project,
to the northeast is where I was looking.
Yeah. So a good place to find a uranium deposit is where those conductors end up kinking a little bit. So if you have a zone where it's kinked and you have deformation coming by, it can create open pore space where those fluids can come through. So what we're observing in a lot of parts of the Athabasca Basin is not where that conductor is nice and straight. It's where it kind of bends a little bit, and that bend can act as a sort of a mechanical opening where fluids and other things can come through and create a deposit.
Right. And again, I mean, this all goes back to reinforcing the message you said, right? You need those breaks, the brecciation, the pore space, the broken up, the faulting, all of that. All that breaking up of the rock to give you that void space or pore space to help give you, that's going to produce the conditions that will give you a good deposit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you need a lot of these ingredients. You may not need every one of them, but having several of them overlapping is a really good sign that you're on the right track.
Right. So you've identified 3 kind of big VTEM bright spots at Davidson River. And one of them definitely seems to fall in the area where, and I know we'll sort of cover this a little bit later, but it's falling in an area that you've identified some of the other phenomena too, like the magnetic transition, the offsets, so everything's kind of, maybe it's not the right word, lining up, because it's not lining up, it's offset.
It's not lining up.
Lining up to, for what you're looking for.
Exactly.
So, and the other thing, and it's probably along the lines of what you were just talking about, Neil, the next slide I'm looking at is talking about the changes in the dip direction of the graphite conductor, the graphitic conductor.
That's right. Yeah. So that's another interpretation tool, another vectoring tool that we can use. That's been seen at other deposits like the Air deposit, where when you're looking at that ZTEM survey, that's looking at a deeper seated EM signature. So that's telling you a lot of information vertically. And when you have a change in direction where it's maybe dipping one way and then there's a sudden change where it starts dipping the other way, you're going to know that there was some sort of structure, a large scale structure vertically that caused that sort of wrenching where it's changing direction this way compared to this way. And right around that transition zone of that dip direction change is where you want to be focusing, because that might be areas, again, where you have that breakup of the corridor, creating that open space, indicating that a structure has gone through. Yeah. So we've identified that in a few different places. The image on the slideshow, if we're referencing that again, the colored image in the background is the VTEM picture showing the conductive rocks in red, less conductive rocks in the green and blue.
Okay.
And then there's green lines that show the ZTEM, which is that deeper picture. And if you zoom in, you can see that you can find a few areas where that dip direction changes.
Has shifted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So starting, I guess, if you will, from say the southeast end, you've got the shallow line on one side, and then as you move to the northwest, all of a sudden that shallow line has switched to the east side, I guess. So it's completely switched sides. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I just grabbed a sheet of paper, so I guess it would be, you have something dipping one way, and then you start to wrench it. If it's paper, it's going to tear. If it's rock, it's going to break, and it's going to tend to break in the middle, and that's again going to give you that broken up pore space and faulting and stuff that's going to gives you the ideal conditions for uranium fluid flow and thus deposition, given that you have those graphite conductors in there. Very cool. So yeah, I guess if you're looking at the slide, then the key thing to focus on is the color of the lines. And I think when I first looked at this slide, that was a little bit lost on me. But if you're looking at those thin lines, the different colors of green switching sides, and that's showing you that you're getting that flip or that change in dip completely opposite. So you would expect some strain in the center.
Yeah,
in the transition.
That's
Okay.
right.
So we've talked about a lot of different things here. So I guess, and in your presentation, I actually think it's really nicely done. You've put together sort of where everything comes together. You call it an area of confluence, or I mean, you interpret it as integration of all vectors. So you've got, the in between the magnetics. Let me know if I've forgotten anything. So in between the magnetics, you got the VTEM, you got the ZTEM, you got the offsets, you got the break in the conductivity plus the offset in conductivity. You have the cross-cutting structures. You have the change in dip. All of this is coming together kind of in this yellow area that you've circled. It's slide 16 as of today when we're looking at it. And all these things, that confluence of all those things coming together, and that's going to be basically your highest priority area for drilling.
That's right. Yeah, that's where we are planning to focus most of our work with the drilling, is along that trend. And then we'll be doing a few testing those targets along strike, but certainly the majority will be along that high priority area.
And you can, and actually on that slide too, Neil, you have clearly identified the lake sediment sample that we talked about earlier as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Just
so
to the west.
What I like about the position of that lake sediment sample is it's what would be downstream or down ice of that high priority area. So, hypothetically, that uranium in the lake is derived from the up ice direction or the upstream direction of that high priority target area. So it's going to tell me, oh yeah, on our property, that sort of lines up really well to be the best place to be targeting. So those other conductive trends are certainly very interesting and merit work. But having that geochem piece lining up really well just makes me that much more excited about that target there. And certainly, I think that there's a lot of room to explore on the project itself. That warrior trend that we've outlined there, also R9 from the geophysics interpretations, that trend itself is about 13 kilometers long, which on the scale of things is quite long. I think we've measured the distance between the Triple R deposit, Arrow deposit. I believe that's something like 7 kilometers, and certainly 13 kilometers, gives us a pretty good chance of finding something along that trend. Indeed. And then we have several trends that are about the same strike length as that main one that we'll be focusing on.
So I guess there's two ways to look at it, and obviously the one being with all that strike length, it kind of increases your odds of having something because you have all that strike length to work with. I guess on the opposite side of things, like even in the high priority area, if I'm reading the scale right, you're still looking at over a 2 kilometer long stretch.
Yeah.
Where sort of all these factors are coming together. I mean, 2 kilometers is a long distance. How do you, when it comes to drilling this, especially because nobody has ever drilled it before, how do you even start picking where specifically on that 2 kilometers that you put the first hole in?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we've got, from our interpretations now, we've got all the drill holes pre-planned, and we'll be systematically going through along that trend. We'll be closing the spacing just a little bit tighter around that high priority area, just to make sure that we don't miss anything, and then spreading out the drilling a little bit more along trend to the northeast and southwest. So we'll be certainly vectoring in as we drill.
Right.
We can see a lot of information in the basement rocks, whether that's the alteration, whether that's structural deformation of the rocks, or whether that's radioactivity, where we find elevated uranium. And if we're lucky, we could intercept high-grade uranium. I mean, that is the ultimate goal.
That's the goal.
But even if we hit alteration, we understand the significance that could be. We could be, these deposits in the Athabasca Basin are interesting. You can drill 10 meters away, 50 meters away from a deposit and have background to no uranium. Drill 10 meters over, you're hitting 15, 20% uranium. It's quite incredible how high grade and how small these things can be. But like you mentioned before, these alteration envelopes can be quite large. So as we drill along strike, we can sort of take the information we have and figure out where to go next.
Right.
And we can
change
the dip direction, the dip of the drilling to go deeper or shallower, depending on what we see at the drill bit. So it'll certainly be a dynamic project where we're not going to drill exactly everything as we have it planned out.
Right.
If we find something interesting, we're going to be following it up as we go. So
yeah, and of course it helps having guys like Sean there that have drilled Arrow. That's probably going to come in handy, I would imagine,
to know the right rocks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think that we've got a really good handle on the geology, specifically in the basement, which is important.
Right.
I mean, when you look over time at exploration in the Athabasca Basin, before people understood the importance of basement rocks, sometimes they only went 10 or 20 meters into the basement and then stopped the drill hole. And they didn't realize that the deposit could actually be entirely basement hosted, because they were only looking at that unconformity and the sandstone above, a little bit of the basement below. If they didn't hit anything, they would stop the drill.
Right.
There's a few instances where drill holes have stopped, right above a deposit in the Athabasca Basin, which is interesting to look back with today's perspective. So certainly knowing what to look for and when we're going to continue the drill hole is important to know, so that we're not, repeating those same mistakes as other explorers, decades ago.
Yeah. Imagine being the person that said, "Oh, let's stop here," and
Yeah,
another 10 more meters, and it would have been a whole different story.
yeah, certainly.
Crazy, crazy how that happens. From an expectations management standpoint, it's probably worth noting. I mean, this is the first time you're ever drilling it. I think you guys have laid it out very well, and I hope that this video has helped people understand it better. Why the geophysics are telling you this is a very high priority area. It's got all the ingredients that you're kind of looking for. But I mean, this is the first time you're drilling it. The odds are likely not that you're going to be drilling through 50% U308, your very first hole. Maybe speak to expectations management about what people should, don't maybe expect, a discovery hole on the first few, right? I mean, it's going to take some time for you guys to understand this. I mean, that's fair for any person drilling this.
Certainly, yeah. A lot of exploration campaigns on new projects or projects that have a lot of the right ingredients, but not yet, onto a uranium zone. It'll take a certain number of holes to find the deposit. Certainly projects that are deeper, like let's say MacArthur River, Cigar Lake, Millennium Deposit, when these are deeper, it's going to take more holes, because you just don't have your drill holes have to be deeper, and right. You're not quite getting as much information per drill hole. So we're at the situation where our drill holes are going to be anywhere between 250, 350 meters for the most part, and we will get a lot of chances through a lot of that drilling of 15 to 17 holes planned. Even if we vector in towards a really interesting area, we can take the information that we gather on our first pass program, revisit the model, rejig our program, and come back in the winter time. And it's often that second drill campaign, after you've collected all that information, that all that extra vectoring tools that you've generated from the drill bit, which obviously information from the drill bit, the core, is going to be far more relevant, significant than the geophysics, which kind of gets you in the right area. But obviously, if you're using targeting based on your drill core information, you're going to be pretty darn close, and getting you a lot more information to throw back into that exploration model that you've developed previously, and fine-tuning things. And I'm expecting that we're going to see a lot of the right rocks when we drill in the basement. So even if we don't hit that, like you said, 50% U308, we're going to be hopefully finding those basement rocks that are continuing that series of the right ingredients for a deposit.
I mean, I certainly hope you hit 50% U308. Hole number one, I'll take it. But
I do. Our shareholder.
I'm a shareholder, so full disclosure.
Certainly. Yeah, but like you said,
no, I mean, expectations management, it's important. That people.
Certainly when the Triple R deposit was discovered, NexGen immediately started following up along strike, along the Patterson Lake corridor, and most of the drilling was focused right around the border, because you would expect to have another discovery close to the original one. It turns out that the Arrow deposit was little ways farther along the deposit, or the property boundary, and it took them their second drill campaign before they made that discovery hole at Arrow. So they learned a lot from their first campaign, learned a lot about the basement rocks, which corridor is the best one to be on, and where along that conductive corridor to be drill testing. So.
Well, and this is important, I think, because I mean, look, this is the junior exploration space. You're not investing in TD Bank. I mean, this is a risky business for any explorer. and I think when you buy into a company like Standard Uranium or any explorer, you have to, like it, you really need to understand what you own. And if, again, the first 15, 17 holes give you all the right alteration and you understand what you own, then you know that, I should be holding or adding more, not selling because I didn't hit 25% U3O8, right? Like this is
Absolutely.
part of the whole due diligence process. It's important for people to understand what you own. I mean, yourself, I'm sure, or John are always probably willing to take calls from investors to have conversations like this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it certainly has the short-term potential for success,
mhm,
but we will be testing our main high priority trend this go around. But
mhm,
like I said, we have those two other trends on our project that
yeah,
have a lot of those same ingredients that we can test on other programs.
mhm,
And certainly that gives us a lot more blue sky potential down the road to make discoveries.
yeah,
Certainly sometimes these projects that have a lot of targets, you don't want to spread out your drilling too much. Otherwise, you're just spreading out your information collecting too far.
yeah,
And when you do that, you don't get a lot of information. But when you kind of focus on one trend at a time, you
mhm,
can unravel that picture as you go.
right.
And that's what our model is for exploration on this go around, is to focus on one, get as much information as we can to unlock that
Mhm.
potential.
And one thing I really like, and you mentioned it earlier, Neil, was the fact that if you look at the scale of the trends that you have, you can fit, a triple R, an arrow, and if you go further northeast, even a Spitfire, probably on the length of these trends, right? Like that's the scale you're talking. Not to say that, I'm not saying today that as much as I'd love it, Standard Uranium will be at arrow times 3, but that's the scale potential you have, correct?
Yeah,
I
I
mean, you
can't say
want,
that, of course,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I'll let
yeah,
you say it.
yeah,
Yeah, certainly the scale is an
yeah,
important thing, because when you look
yeah,
at just the project, it's hard to capture that scale of how long that, or how much strike length of that corridor we
right.
have. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's just important as a shareholder, if you're looking for upside in a company, when you have that scale potential, I think that's what you want to see, right? You
yeah,
want to be able to,
yeah.
it gives you yeah.
So,
Okay.
our goal is to be a player in the region, to continue exploration beyond our first drill campaign.
Right.
I think there's enough potential to keep going here for a number of years, and I want to keep exploring this until we find something, because there's enough targets here that tell me that we're in the right area and that we
Mhm.
want to be exploring this project. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I'm a pun guy, so I've already thrown it in, but I gotta do it twice. I mean, things are lining up because things aren't lining up.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're finding a lot of areas that don't line up
Yeah.
on
There's
a
a lot of
project.
people watching the video that are probably groaning, but I had to throw that in there just to,
There you go.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah, so I mean, exciting time. As we said, seems to be the right time to be a uranium explorer. There's interest coming back to the sector. There's a lot of positive energy. The spot price of uranium has been moving in the right direction. As we all know, the real important thing is the term pricing. When that starts to move, obviously there's going to be interest on projects like yours, especially if you start to hit, the good stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's, the potential share price appreciation upon a
Yeah.
good hit in this market environment. You seem to be, I think the company is kind of coming into the market at just the right time.
Yeah.
Really, um, you know, you came in, I guess you guys IPO just after, things were still pretty wild after the COVID drop we had in March, but yeah, I really think it's Standard has kind of showed up at just the right time.
Yeah, I think so too. And even in a uranium depressed market, the deposits that are found in the Athabasca Basin are so valuable that they are quite significant, even with a low uranium price. So,
Mm-hmm.
major companies and other companies that might want to consolidate projects in the Southwest Athabasca Basin, including, Fission and NexGen, You know, having other discoveries will just make the southwest Athabasca Basin that much more appealing
Attractive.
as an M&A target. So having another deposit here, irrespective of the, you know, overall uranium market, is going to be incredibly useful to add value to our company. Whether we want to continue the project ourselves if we make a discovery, or joint venture with another company to add value and develop the project even further with others in the region. I mean, that's all way down in the future, but certainly like I said, there's been a lot of companies, big companies interested in uranium in the Athabasca Basin, and having another discovery in this region would really justify putting a new mill in the region. Whereas maybe one of these projects alone, it might not be worthwhile to start up, but maybe having a few of them in the pipeline would be good.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, interestingly, I mean, you guys have a pretty good war chest to work with now. You know, you've raised a bunch of money since we spoke with John last. I mean, you know, you announced your financing; it was closed, way oversubscribed. I think multiple times. You know, upsized, lots of interest. That's got to be a nice vote of confidence for yourself, the team, the whole team at Standard Uranium. I'm obviously certainly looking forward to seeing what you guys turn up. And yeah, this has been a lot of fun, Neil. It's been great to talk to you about this and learn about this stuff. And I really hope for anyone watching, listening, that they've, you know, found this helpful in their own due diligence process when, you know, evaluating whether Standard Uranium is right for them. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, happy to be here.
So be nice to have you back maybe a couple months down the road, and maybe you'll have some exciting results to talk about.
Absolutely, yeah. And even if we don't have amazing results, I'm sure I can weave our new results into a compelling story to tell you that we're on to something, because I believe in the story. Even if we don't find the 50% U3O8, it's going to be interesting information that we can vector in towards the next round.
And I mean, and you will be drilling shortly, right? I mean, when this is filmed, it's kind of like mid to late July, still kind of on track for August, I believe.
Yep, that's right. Yep, we're on track for August.
That's good. Okay. Well, exciting times to come. And again, thanks again for your time and for joining us. And we'll look forward to having you back.
Of course. Good.
Cheers.
Thanks.